Sports, joining us to talk LSU football here. As there's been a lot of news over the last 3 or 4 days, from Nussmeier's injury to media availability at practice on Saturday. We've got our guy Glenn joining us. It's been a while because we had to rain check him last time due to some internet issues that we don't have today, so he is back. Glenn, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you guys. Appreciate you having me. How are you guys doing?
Oh, we're doing well. It's good to see you and talk some ball. We'll get it started with the Nussmeier deal. Obviously, it was a hectic, I guess you could say, 48 hours from Wednesday all the way until Friday when Kelly came in to the media room and gave the announcement, and then he was out on the field on Saturday. How crazy was that 48 hours, and then how did he look on the field on Saturday at practice?
Yeah, definitely had a lot of buddies texting me and freaking out a little bit there over that 48 hours. I'm sure you guys did too. But fear not. Brian Kelly and LSU were able to come in and kind of squash the serious injury rumors that were going around. I mean, I don't think there was really ever anything to those. And obviously, he comes in and tells us that Garrett's dealing with some tendonitis issues that have flared up in his knee going back to a previous surgery that he had in 2023. And it's just something that they're going to have to monitor here going forward over the next couple of, really throughout the entirety of this season. I mean, it's a chronic issue. It's not something that ever fully goes away. If you can manage it and make it to where it's maybe not, present in a certain, period of time. And so that's certainly what I think he and LSU are going to be working to do here over the next several months. And I thought he looked pretty good, moving around on Saturday. He had a little sleeve on his knee, I guess, for some extra padding, some extra protection, but moved well in the pocket. You got out and even scrambled for a few runs throughout the course of the practice, and even laid a little bit of a block. There was a little change of direction by Caden Durham on one of the run plays, and kind of a freelance deal. And Nuss kind of maybe stuck his shoulder out in front a little bit to try to give Durham a little bit of extra room to run. So I don't think he's thinking about it too much, and as a result, I don't think we should be thinking about it too much either. So he's looked good, and I thought Saturday was maybe the best that the passing offense has looked from the first couple of days where they've been in full pads. So hopefully some progress is going to be made there over the next several weeks as well.
And then also at practice, what were some of your takeaways? It's been a while since we've spoken, and I think there's kind of been some ebbs and flows with the offensive line where there's been some days where they've been very competitive and looked improved, and then I think last week they had a rough, the first day in full pads was a rough day for that unit, and then obviously practice again on Saturday. What have you seen from that group, whether it's kind of their mentality, their physicality, and the way they've battled against a defensive front, to me, in LSU, which is very, very talented. What's been your takeaways with the offensive line up to this point?
Yeah, look, I mean, they're going up against a group in the defensive line is playing with a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum, and those guys are really kind of leading the charge. I think in fall camp, as you mentioned there, they've been the most consistent group. They've been really, really good. But as a result, the offensive line is going through some growing pains right now. They have some veteran talent. They have guys that have starting experience, but the one thing you need to have is you got to have some cohesion on that O-line. And this is still a first-year group that's been put together, and I think you're still seeing some of that when it translates over to 11 on 11. Just talking with a couple of the guys that were watching the offensive line, defensive line, kind of one-on-one drills. The first team offensive line actually won a good portion of those reps on Saturday when it's just one-on-one, mano-y-mano, their guy going against, y'all's guy. And so, but when that translates over to the 11 on 11 stuff, that's where we're seeing kind of the discrepancy take place. And so I think it's good that they have kind of settled in on a 5. Tyree Adams at left tackle, DJ Chester at left guard, Braylon Moore at center, Josh Thompson at right guard, and Weston Davis at right tackle. It has been a very popular combination here over the first couple weeks of fall camp, and I think we just need to see if they can have a little bit more cohesion here as the weeks go along. That's what's needed. Is I think timing more than anything, and I think that there's been a couple of rotating guys that have rotated at guard. Cohen Eccles comes to mind, certainly Paul Mubenga as well. But I mean, you guys have been out there. I would say, what, 90% of the reps have been going to that first unit as a 5. And I think that that's really, really important that they kind of get that settled here over the first couple weeks, or over the next couple weeks, I should say, and see if they can't push back a little bit. I thought that they pushed back a little bit more on Saturday. The problem with Saturday was the penalties, and there was probably 4 or 5 false starts and a couple of holding calls that really soured what I thought was an otherwise improved day of protection on Nussmeier, and they opened up a few runs too when they weren't, giving up some those free yards because of the penalties. So still some things to clean up for sure, but LSU I think is going to be working with that offensive line from now until that Clemson game to make sure that they're a cohesive unit.
Yeah, and when you look at, obviously fall camp, it's you against you, and it's kind of a catch-22 when we're talking about the offensive line and the defensive line. I've asked this question a handful of times, and I want to get your opinion on, is it more of a really good defensive line versus a good offensive line, or is it an offensive line that's not very good making a defensive line look better than they are, from your point of view?
It's a good question, but I think this defensive line is going to be legit this year. I think they're going to be really good. I love the pieces that they put in place and how those guys are responding to the coaching that they've had. I mean, Kevin Peoples, I think, is one of the better pass rush coaches there is in the game, and Kyle Williams it seems to be looking like he's having a really solid effect on guys like Dominic McKinley, Ahmad Bro. Bernard Gooden has been maybe the star of fall camp so far. And that's where really the pressure has started on the interior. And those guys have done a really nice job of setting the tone for the rest of the defense to make plays as well. And I think you're seeing that. I think that this is just right now a really solid defensive line that's getting the best of an offensive line that's still trying to figure out the chemistry part and the cohesion part. And I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you in 3 weeks if it's going to be fixed or in a better place. I just know that what we're seeing right now has to be better if they have a chance, if they want to have a chance against Clemson. And that's just kind of where I'm at with this right now with the offensive line. I think that they have a lot of work to do, and this is another big week here ahead of them to try to continue to make progress that we started to see maybe on Saturday a little bit.
And then talking about some of those new faces and the additions to that defensive line room, you brought up Bernard Gooden, who has arguably been the star of fall camp for LSU up to this point. Is it with him? You've seen maybe last practice on Saturday the chirping back and forth, a little bit of chippiness between him and Nussmeier, but really the intensity that he's brought every single day to fall camp, going up against the offensive line and being out there on the field. What have you seen from number 88 up to this point?
He's a talker, man. He has gotten into it with just about everybody so far, including Garrett Nussmeier. They had a nice little kind of end of practice chat back and forth at each other. I think Nuss thought he was maybe clapping at the line of scrimmage and causing some of those penalty issues. And, we'll see kind of what happens. But I think Gooden is just a really great veteran piece that's going to be able to make a lot of things happen for LSU. He had 10 tackles for loss at USF last year. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he's had that many in the first 2 weeks of fall camp. I mean, he's been that active up front there and really setting the tone for those younger guys like McKinley, like Bro. Jacoby and Guillory has looked really good next to him as well. And so I think he's probably the guy that, if I had to say right now, would be like the interior D lineman that gets the most reps. But we also know that that's going to be a group that really substitutes a lot here over the first several weeks as they try to lock in a rotation and kind of keep those guys fresh and healthy to where that depth that they have this year between Gooden and Guillory and McKinley and Bro and Sadir Mitchell, that those guys can all have an impact and be really good players for them on the interior. So he's been, I think he's been probably the best player in terms of just consistency out of offense and defense. I mean, he's just been that good. And we'll see kind of what else, kind of crops up here with this interior D line. Like I think that a lot of these guys have immense potential and work really well next to each other, pair really well next to each other, and now it's just going to be about what group is most effective for what situation, and I think that's something that they're still learning right now as a defense.
And you talk about the depth on the defensive line, especially the interior of that defensive line, but really the depth on the defense as a whole for LSU is what's kind of caught my eye so far through fall camp, where they really have a strong rotation at almost every position on the field on that side of the ball, whether it's the defensive backfield, linebacker, edge rusher, interior D-line, like you said. I'll stick with just the defensive backfield, the corners and the safety spots, where they've had a really strong rotation of really – 4 or 5 at both of those positions. What have you seen so far in the defensive rotation for LSU?
Yeah, I think Delane is probably the guy that I feel safest saying right now would be a starter in the secondary for LSU. I think everything else, all bets are off. Like they have been rotating a ton at that other cornerback spot, certainly in the back half of the defense with the safety position. Just a couple names. I think Ashton Stamps and PJ Woodland have maybe had the most first team reps opposite of Delane at this point. Woodland's a guy who's making a ton of plays out there. Stamps has obviously got 2 years of starting experience now under his belt, and I think he's looked a little bit better this year. I still have some worries about him long term with his coverage ability, but I think that there are guys that are going to absolutely be a part of this rotation at cornerback, and that's not settled at all. DJ Pickett has been a pretty consistent second teamer. They've really thrown him, into the wolves here with a lot of their veterans and getting him reps against Barry and Brown and Chris Hilton and some veteran players who have so much experience, and he's learning right now, and I think he's in a learning phase. And to me, it's always been about when DJ Pickett enters that lineup and not if. I don't know that it's going to happen week 1 against Clemson at this point, but I do think that the best version of this secondary and defense will eventually be when Pickett gets up to speed and has kind of learned the college game, has gotten his reps early in the season, and is able to make a huge impact for LSU at some point in his freshman year. At safety, they've rotated a ton there. It's really hard to lock in a duo right now. You've got one series where it's Jordan Gilbert back there with AJ Halsey, another series where it's Tamarcus Cooley and AJ Halsey, and then another series where it's Jordan Gilbert and Deshaun Spears. Like there's probably a group of 5 guys that they've been rotating in between the 4 that I just mentioned, and also Javian Toviano. So there's still a lot that needs to be worked out at safety. So the 2 safety spots and then the second cornerback spot opposite of the lane, I think, are still pretty wide open here as we enter the final 3 weeks here before the Clemson game, and we'll see just kind of what that looks like and which guys are able to maybe separate themselves here over the next few weeks.
A quick one from the chat. Spectrum Wellcare says, ask Glenn, will Zion Williams contribute this year at D-tackle?
Maybe. I think right now it's probably looking like Sadir Mitchell, Dominic McKinley, Jacobian Guillory, Bernard Gooden, and Ahmad Bro are kind of the 5 that have really worked in the most with the first and second team. I'm not saying that a guy like Zion Williams, who's a legit 355 pounds, can't muscle his way in there and have some kind of role where he's a run stuffer this year as kind of a big body. But I think that's kind of the role that they see Sadir Mitchell in right now. And I thought, going back to the spring, he had some really good moments, did Mitchell. And so, I haven't seen a ton of him this year, this fall, just because I've been so ingrained on Gooden and McKinley and Bro and all the plays that they're making right now. But I think the position that you'd ask Zion Williams to play is one that Sadir Mitchell is very capable of playing as well. And so I think that they're probably going to go, experience over freshman right now. But that's not to say that that won't change and Zion Williams can't make some kind of impact as a freshman.
Last one I've got, obviously, Joe Sloan met with the media on Friday after practice. And the biggest takeaway, obviously, from that presser was Kelly coming in and giving the rundown on Nussmeier. But were there any tidbits from Sloan that stood out as he met with the media in a press conference on Friday?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think probably the thing that stood out to me the most was he got asked about what kind of reflecting he's done since last year and the ways to improve the efficiency of the play calling that LSU's had. And he talked a lot about how it's been, kind of a group effort and getting that on track. But really the part that stood out to me was the run game. There were a couple questions that he had about the run game that I thought were interesting and just different ways that they're trying to be creative in that respect. Obviously, Alex Atkins was brought in to be a leading voice in that room as well, along with Sloan and Brad Davis and Frank Wilson on how to get the run game maybe a little bit more consistent this year and really open up those holes for Caden Durham to make some plays happen in the second level. And I think there have been some signs of that, like Durham's broken off a couple of big runs, but there's also been a lot of runs that have gone for no gain or 2 yards or 1 yard or a tackle for loss here. So like they're still working on some things in the run game. The first full day of pads, they had a couple different 11-on-11 drills, and I would say like 95% of the plays were run. Like they were really sticking to the run early and often in that 11-on-11 session. And I think Nussmeier threw only 2 passes. Like it was very intentional with how much they were working on the run on that practice day. So I think that there's some things they have to get better at with the run going forward, but I think that they have the talent at that position to really be explosive if they're able to open up those holes, get the right calls checked. That was another thing that Sloan talked about, is that Nussmeier has as big of a role in this as anything in terms of calling out the right defenses and making sure that they're in the right setup for those run plays. So it's going to be a group effort. I still think that there's work to be done there, but they've also shown an ability to pop off some big runs as well. And Durham, when he gets into that second level, man, he's going to be really hard to deal with if they're able to do that consistently.
And speaking of the run game, before we get you out of here, just the running back position itself, obviously the JT Lindsey situation ongoing. I just want to talk about that room because obviously there's a lot of stock put in on Caden Durham as he was, on preseason award watch lists to be one of the best offensive players in football, and there's a lot of expectation for him to be very, very good going into his sophomore season. But he can't do it by himself. Obviously, running back is a position where you have to have a good mix, and especially definitely 2 guys. That running back room consists of 2 other guys in Harlem Berry and Caleb Jackson, who are expected to take some of that workload away from Caden. What have you seen at fall camp and kind of your expectations for the running back room in 2025?
Yeah, Durham's going to be your featured guy. I'm not saying he's going to run the ball 25, 26 times a game like Leonard Fournette did back in the day, but 15, 16, 17 touches a game is kind of where I'm sitting with Durham. Like he's been that heavily involved in the offensive game plan in fall camp so far, and I think he's going to have a major role in that week 1 game against Clemson. And then, just behind him is just going to be the question mark of how they want to utilize Caleb Jackson and Harlem Berry in particular. Jackson's kind of your ground and pound guy, the guy that, if you're in 3rd and short or 3rd and you just need a couple of yards to run it up the middle, Jackson's going to be that guy. I think the weight is something that was brought up a lot this offseason. He's still around that 230, 235 range. So they obviously think he's going to be the power back for LSU this year. And maybe if they open up some more consistent holes, he can make some different things happen and things of that nature. But the real X factor to me is going to be at Harlem Berry, just because I think he has so much potential to be a multifaceted piece in this offense. I mean, I think on Saturday he had the 2nd most carries behind Caden Durham in that 11-on-11 kind of simulated scrimmage that they had on Saturday. And so he's somebody that has a lot of quick twitch, change direction, speed. He's somebody that I could see them using in the screen game as a running back, in the passing game. So I think that they are really high on him, and his opportunities are only going to continue to increase. But you got to keep those 3 guys healthy. And, I think, as we get further and further along in fall camp, you could see Jawan Johnson getting more and more opportunities at running back to maybe be a 4th guy, with obviously the Lindsey situation playing out the way that it has. So we'll see kind of how that shakes out, but they got to stay healthy at that position because they are on fumes right now from a numbers perspective.
Well, Glenn, we appreciate your time and the insight as always. We'll talk to you again soon, and we'll see you out on the practice field.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you out there.
Thank you. There he is, Glenn West, at Glenn West 21, senior writer for 24/7 Sports, covering